You know, it's been a true Hollywood murder mystery. Much-loved publicist Ronni Chasen brutally gunned down on her way home from a movie premiere over 3 weeks ago. But as recently as last night, the already bizarre case took another surprising turn.
The weapon used by our person of interest, Harold Martin Smith, to commit suicide does preliminarily match the evidence from the Chasen homicide. This is a preliminary match.
Well, that is contrary to what the reports earlier in the week said, that there was no match and that it was back to square one. And while police won't definitively say that Smith killed Chasen, they are saying that he probably acted alone in a random robbery gone bad. And here now to discuss this further, our guests are former prosecutor Robin Sachs, John Nazarian, a Beverly Hills-based private investigator, and Steve Katz, who's the co-executive producer of America's Most Wanted. Robin, I want to start with you on the legal end of all of this. How on earth do we go from the beginning of the week, hearing that we are back to square one, the ballistics don't match the weapon that this, well, I'm going to say alleged, even though he's dead, but alleged assailant used, and the weapon that he used to kill himself, and yet a couple days later we now say the ballistics are a match? What's going on?
What is going on in Beverly Hills is really the big question of the day. No one feels very satiated with the amount of information we've been getting, nor the quality of the information. But what needs to be pointed out is that the reports of the non-match did not come from Beverly Hills Police Department. Those were rumors, reports, and from my understanding, that actually came from a former LAPD officer who was an expert on one of the local shows who made that statement. It got picked up, and that was where we got the non-match. Obviously, changed the story yesterday when Sergeant Snowden came into the press release.
Okay, note to self and all other folks in the media, we really botched this thing. Is that what this comes down to?
Well, that's one of the things. I mean, actually, in some ways, we have botched this in the media in terms of relying on erroneous reports, but we also have to go back to where the erroneous reports have begun. Really, there was very early interviews with the mayor of Beverly Hills. He himself was the one who said it looked like an SUV. It looked like that there was someone from a higher vantage point. Then there was also the report of the 3 gunshots. We don't know if that's erroneous. We don't know if there was actually 3 gunshots. And the problem with yesterday's press conference is none of the erroneous errors were cleared up, so we don't know what's right or what's not right.
Oh, I'm glad you mentioned that.
This is what's confusing.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I want to play for our audience a little moment actually from that press conference you're referring to and the erroneous reports. Have a look.
This is exactly what happens when our quasi-experts that go on the radio and TV that don't know what the heck they're talking about draw conclusions based upon erroneous information. That was wrong. That was a preliminary look and somebody making a guess that it might have been.
So that did happen. Somebody did look at that.
Somebody looked at it, but we don't know anything further except that it was erroneous information.
All right, so now we're supposed to go with the existing information that we have, that these ballistics are a match. Steve Katz, I want to jump over to you about this. Do you think we should be trusting this information now?
I absolutely do think we should be trusting the information. I think that the cops in Beverly Hills did a really good job of keeping the facts close to the vest, which police should do in an investigation. Hollywood is a place where people make their living telling good stories, and while the police were doing their job investigating the case, people were making up good stories and going with them. So I think that the police waited till they had something important to say, and they said it, and they did a good job of ignoring all the other noise that was going on.
Well, and all the while, the tip came in from your show. America's Most Wanted heard the tip about this person bragging that he'd been paid $10,000 or something for this hit to his neighbors?
No, that wasn't our tip at all. That was something that somebody who lived in that apartment had said to some reporter somewhere, and then that became part of the lore that this guy was bragging about getting paid. That never happened as far as we can tell, and that's not what our tipster told us. The reason why the tipster called us was, let me say, for all the right reasons. It had nothing to do with the stuff that you were hearing in the media. Our tipster called us because he thought this was somebody that the police ought to be looking at. Interesting.
John Nazarian, I want you to jump in on this because one of the bits of information that's come out about this investigation is that the assailant was riding a bike. Ronni Chasen was in a Mercedes. How on earth does someone perpetrate a crime like this with, as I remember it, 5 very accurately placed gunshot wounds to a woman who had a Mercedes and could get away very quickly?
It is fascinating from the standpoint of the bike. And my question was, and my thought patterns were, Okay, great. He's in Beverly Hills on a bicycle. He pedaled all the way from his apartment complex, managed to go across town. He commits this murder, and then somehow, with police, paramedics, fire responding, he somehow got away pedaling his bike. It's confusing, and I agree with everything some people have said so far, except that
the bike makes it very confusing. I'll give you that, and I'm going to ask you a little bit about the forensics on the bike in just a moment, and we've got a whole lot more on this story when we come back. We're back talking about the most recent twists and turns in the Ronni Chasen murder investigation, and my guests are back with me. And John Nazarian, I want to just push a little further on this bicycle, because I think it's kind of a weird element of this crime. If there's a bike and the LAPD has the bike, and I guess the Beverly Hills Police Department is trying to get that bike now if they don't already have it, might there be some good forensics that we could get off that bike, like maybe gunshot residue on the handlebars, or maybe something in the treads, maybe some dirt from the location of the shooting? I mean, it's a pretty significant little piece of evidence, isn't it?
I agree with you, and that is a good question. And often with a police conference, a press conference of that nature, you get answers and you feel good about what was said. I think that their release yesterday left more questions unanswered. And I was surprised I didn't see Rip Taylor walking through throwing confetti. That's how confusing it seemed to me.
It seemed like a bit of a circus. Robin, you know, a lot of people, a lot of conspiracy theorists and folks who are always suspect of the process would say, well, it's awfully convenient to blame a dead guy because you don't have to go through, I don't know, the $1 million or so it takes to prosecute somebody, and you don't have to carry on with the investigation. Case closed. Is that unfair?
Well, certainly that a conspirator theorist person would actually agree with that statement. But and no doubt Beverly Hills PD wants this case solved and closed. They don't like the media. They haven't been quiet about that. But it does leave law enforcement with a very empty feeling. As a former prosecutor working with law enforcement, there is a joy and sense of closure when you can put someone on the stand, when you can get the answers to the questions, and when you can actually make sure justice is served. All right, Steve Katz, this morning on Good Morning America, there was a report that the police are going to be scanning a lot of the video surveillance from the area where this happened to try to corroborate this whole issue with the bicycle. But look, this is 3 weeks ago. Isn't that sort of crime fighting 101? Don't you do that first to see if there's any suspect? You don't wait for a tip to come in from your venerable show. Aren't you supposed to look at all those things from the get-go?
Yeah, but I got to say that they weren't just sitting around waiting for a tip from our show. They were actively investigating the case. When I hear, and I'm not talking about John and Robin here, but when I hear a lot of people talking about the case and was it this, was it that, one thing that we've learned here at America's Most Wanted, we've been doing this show for almost a quarter century, is it's an awful fact, but sometimes bad things happen to good people. I know that sounds trite, but it's true. The fact that the police are saying this was a robbery gone bad doesn't mean it wasn't a robbery gone bad. It could be just that simple. They obviously have more to do to lock everything down 100%. They said yesterday they still had some testing to do. And you got to know, and I don't know this for a fact, but I got to believe that they have more than just our tip, and I'm sure they do. So sometimes crimes don't make sense. Sometimes people try to fill in the blanks, but if it points to, if the head detective in the case says this points to a robbery gone bad, he's got his reasons for saying that. And I know people are going to read whatever they want into it, but he said what he said for a reason. All right, Steve Katz and John Nazarian and Robin Sachs, thank you all for talking about this. I have a feeling it's not the last we're going to be talking about it. Thanks, guys.